There's a manuscript Carl Jung never wanted you to read, pages handwritten in ink that seems to have blood mixed in, scrawled notes in the margins with symbols that send chills down your spine, and a discovery so disturbing about human nature that Jung kept this knowledge locked away until he died. Before you continue, take a deep breath, because what you're about to uncover will shake everything you think you know about yourself. Jung unearthed something that mainstream psychology has never admitted. He found the key to unlocking a power that's been dormant within you since birth, a power so intense it can completely transform your reality or destroy it. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to have an inexplicable magnetic force, how they command attention effortlessly, as if the universe conspires in their favor? Jung knew the secret. In 1957, 3 years before his death, Carl Jung locked a series of manuscripts in a vault in Switzerland. He left specific instructions. These papers were not to be opened for 50 years, and even then, only by individuals prepared for the truth. What Jung discovered was so radical that he feared the consequences, because this knowledge wasn't just psychological theory, it was a practical method for integrating what he called the shadow self and unleashing the power it contains. But here's what almost no one tells you about the shadow self. It's not just the negative aspects you repress. The shadow self is the repository of all your untapped potential, all the life force you've rejected out of fear, shame, or societal conformity. And Jung discovered how to access this energy in a controlled way. The problem is, this knowledge is dangerous. Imagine for a moment that inside you exists a source of personal power so intense it could completely transform your ability to influence, create, attract, and manifest results. But to access this power, you need to confront everything you've spent your life avoiding about yourself. Jung called this process confronting the shadow self, and he developed specific techniques he never published. In his personal diaries found decades later, he wrote, "He who integrates his shadow self becomes whole, but he who fails in this process is lost forever." Why did Jung never share this method publicly? Because he witnessed firsthand what happened to people who attempted to integrate their shadow self without proper preparation. Some developed a destructive arrogance, others plunged into deep depressions, and some simply vanished from their previous lives as if they'd become entirely different people. Integrating the shadow self isn't self-help, it's psychological alchemy, but there is a safe way to do it. And Jung left clues hidden within his public writings, codes that only those who truly understand his work can decipher. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to reveal this method step by step. But first, you need to understand why this knowledge was considered so dangerous. The shadow self isn't just some abstract psychological theory, it's a living force within you. Jung discovered that when you reject aspects of your personality, be it anger, sensuality, ambition, wild creativity, these aspects don't disappear. They accumulate in an unconscious region of the mind, gaining autonomous power. And here's the secret that changed everything for Jung. This accumulated force can be consciously redirected. It can be transformed into personal magnetism, explosive creativity, unwavering courage, and a presence that others feel instantly. But for that, you need to do something society has taught you to avoid at all costs. You need to look directly at what you reject most in yourself and embrace it. Jung discovered that there's a vast difference between repressing the shadow self and integrating it. Repression creates neurosis, addiction, self-sabotage. Integration creates power. In the secret manuscripts, he described specific cases. A woman who integrated her repressed anger and became a natural leader in her company. A man who embraced his rejected sensuality and developed magnetic charisma. Another who accepted his selfish ambition and built an empire. But there are also disturbing accounts. One person who attempted to integrate the shadow self without proper methodology and developed uncontrollable destructive impulses. Another who delved so deep into the dark side that they lost touch with basic moral values. That's why Jung created a gradual method, a process that allows you to integrate the power of the shadow self without losing your humanity. And this method begins with a discovery that will shock you. Have you ever felt like there's another person living inside you? Someone braver, more creative, more authentic? Someone you wish you could be but have never allowed to fully emerge? That person isn't fantasy. It's your integrated shadow self. Jung realized that we all live as diminished versions of our true potential. We cut off parts of ourselves to conform to family, social, and professional expectations. And those cut-off parts pulsate in the unconscious, waiting for an opportunity to emerge. Integrating the shadow self is the process of reuniting these lost fragments of yourself, and when that happens, something extraordinary emerges. But here's what Jung never said publicly. The shadow self has different layers, and each layer unleashed exponentially multiplies your personal power. The first layer is the forbidden impulses you consciously reject. Anger, sensuality, selfishness, arrogance. When you integrate this layer, you gain presence and authenticity. The second layer is your undeveloped potential. Wild creativity, natural leadership, penetrating intuition. When you integrate this layer, you become magnetic and influential. But there's a third layer, a layer Jung only mentioned in personal letters to close colleagues. A layer that contains not only rejected aspects of your current personality, but evolutionary potentials that transcend the normal limitations of human nature. Jung called this the transpersonal shadow, and he discovered that when someone fully integrates these three layers, they develop abilities others consider almost supernatural. Intuition bordering on clairvoyance, a presence that affects the physical environment, the ability to influence situations with focused intent alone. That's why this knowledge was kept secret. Jung knew that in the wrong hands, this power could be used for manipulation, control, domination, but in the right hands, it could create genuine leaders, visionaries, people capable of raising the level of collective consciousness. Now, you want to know how to identify if you possess the potential for this deep integration? There's a simple test Jung devised, a way to recognize if you have natural access to the deepest layers of the shadow self. First sign, you feel you live as an edited version of yourself, as if you constantly cut impulses, ideas, expressions to fit situations. Second sign, other people comment that you have something different, even without knowing how to explain what, an intensity, a depth that draws attention. Third sign, you feel a magnetic force towards hidden knowledge, ancient wisdoms, themes that most consider esoteric or disturbing. If you recognize these signs, Jung would say, you were born with natural access to the transpersonal shadow. And here's the first practical technique he developed, the shadow mirror contemplation. Every night for 21 days, you position yourself in front of a mirror in the dark. You light only a single candle, and you ask a specific question. Who are you that I don't allow to emerge? But be warned, this isn't New Age visualization. It's a precise protocol that Jung tested on dozens of patients, and the results were consistently disturbing and transformative. In the first few days, you begin to see rejected aspects of your personality manifesting in the reflection. Expressions you never allowed, gestures you always suppressed. A raw, more intense, more authentic version of yourself. In the intermediate days, something even deeper emerges. You begin to perceive undeveloped potentials, talents you abandoned, dreams you betrayed, a creative force you always kept under control. But in the final day, if you have the courage to continue, something transcendent manifests. Jung described it as the encounter with the superior self through shadow integration. A version of yourself that incorporates both light and darkness, both power and responsibility, both individuality and universal connection. And when this integration is complete, your presence in the world changes radically. People feel your authenticity immediately. Opportunities begin to appear synchronistically. Your ability to influence situations multiplies, and you develop unshakable confidence because you're no longer hiding aspects of yourself. But Jung was sure to warn, this transformation is not reversible. Once you fully integrate your shadow self, you can no longer go back to living as before. You can no longer accept superficial relationships, meaningless jobs, empty conversations. You become someone who lives exclusively in authenticity, and that scares many people around you. That's why Jung asked everyone who sought this path, are you willing to lose your known life to gain your true life? Because shadow integration is essentially that. It's exchanging the security of conformity for the adventure of radical authenticity. And the results are proportional to the risk. In the secret manuscripts, Jung documented cases of people who completely integrated their shadow self, and developed what he called natural authority, an ability to command respect effortlessly, to inspire confidence instantly, to influence situations simply with their presence. But he also documented the failures, people who tried to accelerate the process and lost themselves in destructive impulses, others who integrated only the superficial layers and developed an inflated ego, and some who came close to total integration but retreated at the last moment for fear of the responsibilities this power would bring. Shadow integration is not for everyone. Jung was clear about this. It's for those who prefer disturbing truth to comfortable lies, for those who choose difficult growth instead of safe stagnation. But if you've come this far, if you're still interested in discovering the specific methods Jung developed, then you are probably one of the people prepared for the truth. And there's a second technique that Jung considered even more powerful than the mirror contemplation: the shadow dialogue. This technique involves literally conversing with rejected aspects of your personality as if they were real people. Jung discovered that the shadow has distinct sublayers, each with specific characteristics, and that you can establish conscious dialogue with each of them. For example, your repressed anger may manifest as an authoritarian male figure, your rejected sensuality as a seductive female figure, your controlled ambition as a ruthless businessman. Jung taught his patients to visualize these figures and talk directly to them, to ask, "What do you want from me? What power do you represent? How can I integrate your strength without destroying myself?" And the answers were always surprising. Repressed anger usually responded, "I want you to defend your values without apology." Rejected sensuality, "I want you to express yourself with authentic passion." Controlled ambition, "I want you to pursue your goals without false modesty." In other words, the negative aspects of the shadow revealed themselves as virtues distorted by repression, and when you consciously integrate these energies, they transform into psychological superpowers. Anger becomes magnetic assertiveness, sensuality becomes natural charisma, ambition becomes visionary leadership. But here's the secret that differentiates Jung's method from any other psychological approach. He discovered that integration doesn't just happen on a mental level, it needs to be embodied physically. Jung observed that people who truly integrated their shadow self even changed in their body posture. They walked differently. They spoke with a different tone of voice. They emanated a completely transformed physical presence. That's why he developed specific exercises to embody the integrated shadow. One of them involves identifying a gesture or movement that you always suppressed, perhaps a more expansive way of gesturing, a more upright posture, a more intense way of looking into someone's eyes. For 21 days, you consciously practice this repressed gesture until it becomes natural. And Jung discovered that small physical changes generate huge psychological transformations. Because the body is where the shadow gets stuck, every repressed emotion crystallizes into muscle tension, contracted posture, limited breathing, and when you release these tensions, you release the energy that was trapped there. But be careful. This release can be too intense if done quickly. Jung documented cases of individuals who unleashed pent-up shadow energy and experienced temporary identity crises. They questioned relationships, careers, fundamental values. It's what he termed the dark night of the soul, a necessary period of deconstruction before reconstruction at a higher level. And here's something Jung never published. There's a way to navigate this dark night faster, yet safely. A protocol he developed for patients needing rapid transformation. Jung called it controlled shadow immersion. For 7 consecutive days, you dedicate 3 hours daily to consciously exploring rejected aspects of your personality, not to judge or change them, but to understand and integrate them. Day 1. Explore your anger. Write about situations where you felt furious but controlled yourself. Feel this anger in your body. Discover the message it holds for you. Day 2. Explore your sadness. Connect with unprocessed losses. Allow yourself to cry without resistance. Discover the wisdom sadness carries. Day 3. Explore your fear. Identify risks you avoid due to insecurity. Feel this fear physically. Discover the protection it offers and the growth it hinders. Day 4. Explore your envy. Recognize qualities you admire in others, but deny in yourself. Discover the untapped potential envy reveals. Day 5. Explore your arrogance. Identify moments where you felt superior but masked it with false modesty. Discover the legitimate confidence beneath the arrogance. Day 6. Explore your shame. Connect with aspects of yourself you consider unacceptable. Discover the authenticity that exists beyond shame. Day 7. Integration. Dialogue with these aspects as if they were internal advisors. Negotiate how to incorporate each one's energy constructively. Jung said individuals completing this protocol emerged fundamentally transformed, with a stronger presence, more genuine confidence, a greater ability to positively influence situations, but they also emerged more selective, no longer tolerating relationships, environments, or activities that denied their authenticity. That's the price of shadow integration. You gain personal power, but lose the ability to live comfortable lives. And here's the question Jung posed to everyone considering this path. Would you rather be powerful and authentic, even if it means temporary loneliness? Or would you rather remain accepted and mediocre? Because shadow integration is incompatible with mediocrity. It's a radical choice for personal excellence, even when that excellence bothers others. In his secret manuscripts, Jung wrote, "The integrated person doesn't seek approval. They emanate such natural authority that others automatically recognize their leadership. And this is only the first layer of the method, because there's something even deeper Jung discovered about the nature of the shadow, something that completely revolutionizes how you understand your human potential. Jung realized the shadow doesn't just contain rejected aspects of your current personality. It contains evolutionary potentials humanity hasn't collectively developed yet. In other words, your personal shadow is connected to a collective shadow containing future capacities of the human species, and when you deeply integrate your personal shadow, you gain access to these transpersonal capacities. Jung called this individuation through shadow integration, the process of becoming more than an ordinary human being through the radical acceptance of everything you are, and the capacities that emerge transcend normal psychological limitations. Intuition that functions as direct knowing, a presence that affects the physical environment, the ability to influence situations through focused intention, synchronicity happening with abnormal frequency. Jung knew these capacities would sound impossible to skeptical minds. That's why he documented them only in personal letters and private manuscripts. But for those prepared to accept expanded reality, these powers are the natural result of complete integration. And there are specific signs you're accessing these transpersonal levels of the shadow. First, you begin to know things without knowing how you know. Intuitions that consistently prove accurate. Second, your physical presence affects the mood of environments. People feel different when you enter or leave a place. Third, situations align in your favor in ways that seem more than coincidence, as if the universe conspires to support your goals. If you recognize these signs, Jung would say you're integrating the transpersonal shadow, and here's where the method becomes truly revolutionary. Jung discovered there's a specific hierarchy in shadow integration, and that skipping steps leads to destruction, not transformation. In his 1957 manuscripts, he described what he called the 7 gates of the shadow. Each gate represents a layer of self-acceptance that needs to be traversed in a specific sequence. First gate, accepting you have socially unacceptable impulses. Second gate, accepting these impulses have value and purpose. Third gate, accepting you've suppressed genuine talents out of fear. Fourth gate, accepting you are more powerful than you allow yourself to appear. Fifth gate, accepting you have access to inexplicable wisdoms. Sixth gate, accepting you can influence reality in unconventional ways. Seventh gate, accepting total responsibility for this integrated power. And here's what Jung never publicly said about each gate. The first gate seems simple, but it destroys most people, because accepting your unacceptable impulses means admitting you're not who you pretended to be. It means recognizing that beneath the social mask exists someone rawer, more intense, more wild. Jung documented the case of a religious pastor who attempted to traverse this gate. For weeks, he consciously explored his anger, his lust, his envy, and discovered that beneath the holy man existed a ferocious warrior. Initially, this terrified him. He considered abandoning the process, but Jung encouraged him to continue, explaining that recognizing these aspects doesn't mean expressing them destructively. It means integrating them consciously. The result? This pastor became the most magnetic and influential religious leader in his region, because his spirituality now incorporated authentic masculine strength, not just superficial kindness. But see, this was only the first gate. The second gate, this is where Jung lost many patients, because accepting that negative impulses hold value and purpose challenges decades of moral conditioning. Jung discovered that each rejected emotion carries essential information about your authentic values. Your anger shows where your boundaries have been violated. Your envy reveals undeveloped potentials. Your arrogance points to real talents you deny possessing. One woman Jung treated had completely repressed her sexuality, deeming it sinful. At the second gate, she had to accept that this sexual energy contained her artistic creativity, her passion for life, her capacity for deep connection. When she stopped repressing this energy and began to consciously channel it, her art exploded with creativity. She became an internationally recognized painter because the same force she repressed as lust revealed itself as creative passion. Jung wrote, "That which we reject in ourselves always contains exactly the power we need for our evolution." The third gate shatters illusions of false modesty. Here you must admit that you've repressed genuine talents out of fear of standing out, of causing discomfort, of taking on greater responsibilities. Jung told of an engineer who always knew he had natural leadership ability, but chose safe technical positions to avoid exposure. At the third gate, he had to accept that this choice was killing him from the inside. Gradually, he began to take on higher visibility projects. He discovered that his ability to inspire teams was extraordinary. Within 2 years, he was running the entire company. But Jung warned, the third gate demands moral courage, because embracing your talents means accepting responsibility for using them. This is where many people recoil. They prefer to continue diminishing themselves rather than bear the weight of their real potential. The fourth gate. This is where the process becomes truly dangerous. Here, you must accept that you are more powerful than you allow yourself to appear. And this power isn't just talent or charisma. It's a real ability to influence situations, people, even coincidences, through your integrated presence. Jung observed that people who crossed this gate developed what he called magnetic authority, a presence others feel immediately, even without understanding why. He documented the case of a shy teacher who, after integrating the fourth gate, became a speaker who could hold audiences of thousands in complete silence, not through oratory techniques, but through a presence that emanated natural authority. But Jung was quick to warn. The power of the fourth gate can corrupt if not grounded in a higher purpose. He who seeks power for the ego will be destroyed by it. Therefore, he created specific safeguards, techniques to ensure that integrated power is used for elevation, not domination. One of these safeguards is the golden shadow test. Before moving to the fifth gate, you must identify how you would use your amplified power to benefit others, not just yourself. Jung discovered that people who failed this test invariably developed destructive megalomania, because power without a higher purpose always corrupts. But those who passed the test accessed capabilities that transcended normal psychological limitations. The fifth gate. This is where Jung began to document phenomena he himself considered on the edge of believability. Here, you must accept that you have access to inexplicable wisdom, knowledge that arrives in your mind without an identifiable source, insights into situations you shouldn't logically be able to comprehend. Jung called this access to the collective unconscious through shadow integration. When you stop filtering aspects of yourself, you also stop filtering information arriving from transpersonal sources. He documented cases of people who, after crossing the fifth gate, began to know things about other people just by looking at them, understand complex dynamics instantly, predict the unfolding of situations with abnormal accuracy. A businessman Jung followed developed an almost supernatural ability to assess people. In 15-minute interviews, he could determine not only technical competence, but potential for growth, cultural compatibility, even future psychological problems. His competitors said he was lucky in hiring. Jung knew it was conscious access to transpersonal intuition. But here's what Jung never published about this ability. It comes with overwhelming responsibility. When you know things about people that they themselves don't know, when you perceive potentials and problems that others don't see, you must decide how to use this information ethically. Jung wrote in a personal letter, "The fifth gate transforms you into an involuntary seer, and vision without wisdom is a curse." Therefore, he created the protocol of silent wisdom. People who access the fifth gate learn to use transpersonal insights to help others indirectly, without revealing the source of the knowledge. The businessman mentioned never told employees what he knew about them, but he created opportunities for them to develop potentials he perceived. He offered subtle support for problems he anticipated. He guided without controlling. Jung said, "True transpersonal power is invisible. It acts through synchronicities, not through domination." The sixth gate. This is where Jung hesitated before documenting. Here, you must accept that you can influence reality in unconventional ways, through focused intention, conscious presence, energetic alignment with situations. Jung observed that completely integrated people developed an ability to magnetize favorable situations, as if reality subtly reorganized itself around their presence. He documented cases that sounded like fiction. An artist who, after crossing the sixth gate, began to attract opportunities with abnormal synchronicity, galleries inviting her without her seeking them, collectors discovering her work by chance, funding appearing exactly when she needed it, a doctor who developed a therapeutic presence that inexplicably accelerated healing, patients recovering more quickly under his care, even with treatments identical to other doctors. Jung knew these accounts would sound impossible to materialistic minds. That's why he kept them in separate manuscripts, with instructions to be revealed only to researchers prepared to accept expanded realities. But he also knew these phenomena were real, and they had an explanation. When you fully integrate your shadow self, you stop wasting energy on internal conflicts. All your life force becomes available to influence the external environment. And this influence happens through subtle fields that science doesn't yet fully understand. Jung wrote, "The fully integrated person doesn't fight reality, they dance with it. And in this dance, reality and intention become partners." But here's the most serious warning Jung left. The sixth gate can lead to the illusion of omnipotence. People who develop the ability to influence synchronicities sometimes forget they are channels of greater forces, not absolute controllers. Jung documented cases of people who lost themselves in messianic fantasies after accessing the sixth gate, who began to believe they were superior to other human beings, who developed destructive spiritual arrogance. That's why he created the protocol of radical humility. Before consolidating the capabilities of the sixth gate, you need to deeply accept that you are an instrument of larger evolutionary forces, not a personal god. And this acceptance prepares you for the final gate, the seventh gate, accepting total responsibility for this integrated power. Here, Jung becomes almost prophetic in his notes. He predicted that fully integrated people would become seeds of a new evolutionary phase of humanity. But he also warned that with transcendent power comes transcendent responsibility. You can no longer live only for yourself. Your existence automatically becomes a service to collective evolution. Jung wrote, "He who crosses the seventh gate ceases to be an ordinary person. He becomes a conscious catalyst for human transformation." And here's the most disturbing revelation from the manuscripts. Jung discovered that there is a specific number of fully integrated people needed to raise humanity's collective consciousness. He called it the evolutionary critical mass, and he calculated that this number was nearing being reached in his time. That's why he kept the manuscript secret, because he knew that when the critical mass was reached, humanity would undergo an accelerated transformation, and he wasn't sure if the species was ready for this change. But he also left clues so that the right people could find the way, because he knew that evolution cannot be indefinitely prevented. Now, do you want to know if you have the potential to cross all 7 gates? There is a test that Jung created. A series of questions that reveal if you have the necessary psychological structure for complete integration. First question: can you imagine a version of yourself that is simultaneously more powerful and more compassionate than you are today? Second question: are you willing to abandon familiar identities if they limit your authentic growth? Third question: Can you accept responsibility for positively influencing the lives of other people, even when they don't ask for help? If you answered yes to all three questions, Jung would say you have the potential for transpersonal integration. And here's the first specific technique for crossing the gates: the personal shadow mapping. For 21 days, you will systematically map all the rejected aspects of your personality, not to judge them, but to understand what energy each one represents. Day 1 to 3, identify all the emotions you consider unacceptable and ask, what authentic value does this emotion protect? Day 4 to 6, identify all the impulses you repress and ask, what life force does this impulse represent? Day 7 to 9, identify all the talents you minimize and ask, what responsibility would this talent require? Day 10 to 12, identify all the ambitions you deny and ask, what greater purpose could this ambition serve? Day 13 to 15, identify all the fears you avoid and ask, what growth is this fear protecting? Day 16 to 18, identify all the power fantasies you have and ask, how could this power benefit others? Day 19 to 21, integrate all the discoveries by asking, who would I be if I completely accepted all these aspects? Jung discovered that people who completed this mapping emerged with a radically different self-portrait, much more complex, powerful, and responsible than they imagined. And here's where the method becomes truly practical. Jung developed specific exercises to physically incorporate each discovery, because he knew that mental integration alone does not generate real transformation. To integrate repressed anger, practice defending your opinions without apologizing, even when others disagree. To integrate denied sensuality, practice expressing authentic passion for your activities without holding back from shame. To integrate hidden ambition, practice taking leadership positions in small situations without false modesty. To integrate wild creativity, practice expressing unconventional ideas even when others don't understand. Jung observed that small behavioral changes generate huge psychological transformations because the body is where the shadow is imprisoned, and releasing the body releases the psyche. But here's the secret that differentiates real integration from superficial self-acceptance. Jung discovered that true integration generates what he called the paradox of powerful humility. You become simultaneously more confident and more humble, more assertive and more compassionate, more individual and more connected. Because when you stop spending energy suppressing aspects of yourself, this energy becomes available to expand your consciousness beyond yourself. Jung wrote, "The integrated person does not seek power over others. They emanate power that elevates others." And this is the crucial difference between shadow integration and ego inflation. Ego inflation makes you feel superior to others. Shadow integration makes you feel responsible for elevating others. Ego inflation generates arrogance. Shadow integration generates natural authority. Ego inflation divides. Shadow integration unifies. Jung created a specific test to distinguish between the two. If after working with your shadow, you feel more judgmental towards less evolved people, you are developing ego inflation. If you feel more compassionate with human limitations, you are genuinely integrating. If you want to prove your power to others, ego inflation. If you want to use your power to serve greater purposes, authentic integration. Jung warned that ego inflation is a constant danger on the path of integration, and that conscious humility is the necessary antidote. That's why he created the practice of daily dedication. Every morning, before you begin your day, you mentally dedicate your integrated talents to the service of something larger than yourself. This could be your family, your community, human evolution, planetary well-being, anything that resonates with a higher purpose. This dedication isn't a religious ritual. It's a psychological alignment that ensures your integrated power flows towards elevated purposes, not ego gratification. Jung discovered that people who practiced this dedication developed a presence that others instantly recognized as special, but not threatening, because dedicated power is safe power, and safe power attracts collaboration, not competition. In the 1958 manuscripts, Jung wrote his final observations on the process. The one who completely integrates their shadow self becomes a full human being. No more, no less than human, but finally, completely human. And a complete human being is a transformative force simply by existing. He observed that fully integrated individuals didn't need to do anything special to positively influence the world. Their presence was already transformative. But he also noted that the path never truly ends. The integration of the shadow self is not a final state. It's an ongoing process of expanding consciousness. Each level of integration reveals new layers of potential. And here's the final revelation of this part of the method. Jung discovered that there's a collective shadow that contains evolutionary potentials for the entire human species, and that when you completely integrate your personal shadow self, you gain access to this transpersonal dimension. This is where the process becomes truly revolutionary, because you're no longer just integrating rejected aspects of your individual personality. You're becoming a conscious conduit for the next phase of human evolution. Jung predicted that people who reach this level of integration would develop capabilities we now consider paranormal: natural telepathy, direct energetic influence, access to knowledge that transcends individual learning, and that these people would recognize each other instantaneously. They would form an informal network of evolutionary catalysts, working to accelerate humanity's collective awakening. In his final manuscripts, Jung wrote, "The future of the human species depends on individuals courageous enough to completely integrate their shadow nature, because only through this integration can humanity transcend its current limitations. But to reach this transpersonal level, you first need to master the fundamental techniques of personal integration. And here's the most powerful technique Jung developed to accelerate this process: the Golden Shadow Ritual." Jung created this protocol after observing that people who integrated their shadow self only mentally didn't develop real power. A ritual was needed that incorporated the transformation on the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual levels simultaneously. But pay attention. This isn't some fanciful, mystical ritual. It's a precise psychological protocol that Jung tested in dozens of cases, and the results were consistently transformative and disturbing. The ritual takes place over 49 consecutive days, 7 weeks of progressive integration, where each week you work with a specific layer of the shadow self. Week 1, recognition. You identify and acknowledge all rejected aspects. Week 2, acceptance. You accept these aspects as legitimate parts of yourself. Week 3, dialogue. You establish conscious communication with each aspect. Week 4, negotiation. You negotiate how to express each energy constructively. Week 5, incorporation. You practice expressing these energies in the real world. Week 6, integration. You harmonize all energies into a unified presence. Week 7, transcendence. You dedicate your integrated power to higher purposes. Jung discovered that this 7-week progression corresponds exactly to the time needed for the nervous system to incorporate profound identity changes. But here's what makes this ritual truly revolutionary. Each week includes a decisive confrontation, where you need to publicly express the aspect you're integrating, not destructively, but authentically and constructively. Week 1, express an opinion you'd normally withhold for fear of conflict. Week 2, demonstrate a talent you'd normally hide out of false modesty. Week 3, assume a responsibility you'd normally avoid due to insecurity. Week 4, defend a value you'd normally abandon for convenience. Week 5, pursue a goal you'd normally postpone due to perfectionism. Week 6, lead a situation you'd normally leave to others. Week 7, serve a cause greater than yourself. Jung observed that people who completed these decisive confrontations emerged fundamentally transformed, with a solid presence that others recognized immediately, but he also documented the failures. People who tried to accelerate the process and skipped steps developed emotional instability. Others who performed the ritual internally without the public confrontations didn't truly integrate the changes. Jung wrote, "The integration of the shadow self requires public courage, not just private acceptance, because what we don't express in the world remains unintegrated in the psyche." And here's the most disturbing part of the ritual. In the 3rd week, something unexpected always happened. Jung called it the reality test. Situations arose that forced the person to choose between reverting to old patterns or fully embracing the transformation. One of the cases Jung documented involved a shy accountant who, during the ritual, began to express his repressed natural leadership. In the third week, his boss unexpectedly left the company, and he was invited to take over the position. The reality test: accept the responsibility and fully embrace his leadership ability, or decline and return to the safety of invisibility. He chose to accept, and Jung observed that this choice consolidated a transformation that lasted for decades. Jung wrote, "The universe tests our sincerity by offering opportunities that demand real courage. Those who pass the test receive real power. Those who fail remain talking about transformation without ever living it." But here's the secret Jung kept only in his final manuscripts. The Golden Shadow ritual doesn't just transform you. It activates a network of synchronicities that connects you with other people in a similar process of integration. Jung observed that individuals who completed the ritual began attracting collaborators, mentors, opportunities. It seemed like more than mere coincidence, as if the universe itself conspired to support their evolution. He theorized that a morphogenetic field of integrated consciousness exists, and that when you become truly authentic, you automatically connect with this field. In his 1959 manuscripts, Jung wrote, "Those who fully integrate their shadow self discover they are not alone. There's an invisible brotherhood of awakened individuals, working to elevate collective consciousness." And here's the revelation Jung considered more important than any psychological discovery. He discovered that when a sufficient number of people fully integrate their shadow self, all of humanity undergoes an evolutionary leap, a collective elevation of consciousness, happening at an accelerated pace. Jung calculated this tipping point was nearing, and that the people completing the ritual in his time were preparing for this collective awakening. That's why he kept the manuscript secret until the right time arrived. And here's how to know if you are ready for the Golden Shadow ritual. Do you feel you're living a diminished version of your true potential? Do you sense a dormant power within you, waiting to be unleashed? Do you feel called to contribute significantly to human evolution? If you answered yes, Jung would say you're one of the individuals chosen by the evolutionary process to be a conscious catalyst, and here are the specific signs that the ritual is working. First week, you feel an expansion in how you see yourself. Aspects you considered negative begin to reveal their constructive value. Second week, others start commenting that you seem different, more authentic, more present, more magnetic. Third week, unusual opportunities begin to appear. Invitations of proposals and possibilities that didn't exist before. Fourth week, you develop unshakable confidence, not arrogance, but a quiet certainty about your worth and purpose. Fifth week, your physical presence changes. Posture, voice, movement, everything becomes more solid and charismatic. Sixth week, you begin to influence situations without conscious effort, as if your presence reorganizes energies around you. Seventh week, you feel a deep connection with purposes that transcend personal interest, a calling to serve collective evolution. Jung observed that people experiencing this progression emerged from the ritual as complete human beings, not more or less than human, but finally realized in their full potential. But he also warned about the dangers. The Golden Shadow ritual is irreversible. Once begun, you cannot return to your previous unconsciousness. You will become responsible for using your integrated power ethically. That's why Jung created an oath all participants had to take before beginning. "I swear to use my integrated power to elevate human consciousness, not for personal domination. I swear to serve collective evolution, even when it demands personal sacrifice. I swear to remain humble before the forces working through me." And here's the deepest part of the protocol. On the 49th day, you perform the final dedication ritual, a moment where you consciously offer your transformed ego to the service of something infinitely greater than yourself. Jung wrote, "At this moment, the person ceases to be an ordinary individual and becomes a conscious channel of human evolution." This may sound grandiose, but it's simply the natural realization of full human potential. Now, you want to know what specific results to expect after completing the ritual? Jung documented consistent patterns in all individuals who finished the process. Results in the first 30 days, magnetic presence that attracts people and opportunities, unshakable confidence that doesn't depend on external validation, ability to positively influence situations without conscious effort. Results in the first 90 days. Development of intuition that functions as direct knowing. Frequent synchronicities that facilitate your goals. Spontaneous recognition by others as a natural leader. Results in the first year. Ability to inspire transformation in others simply by your presence. Access to insights that transcend personal knowledge. A sense of purpose that connects your individual actions with collective evolution. But Jung made sure to warn, these results are not personal powers you possess. They are natural capacities of the fully integrated human being. You become a channel for the expression of these potentials, not an owner of them. And here's the crucial difference between authentic integration and spiritual inflation. Authentic integration generates growing humility. The more power you integrate, the more you realize you are an instrument of larger forces. Spiritual inflation generates growing arrogance. The person believes they've developed special powers that make them superior to others. Jung created a simple test to distinguish. If after the ritual you feel chosen or special compared to other people, you've developed spiritual inflation. If you feel responsible for using your gifts to uplift others, you've integrated authentically. The difference is subtle but crucial and determines whether you'll become a force of evolution or division. Now, there's something even deeper that Jung discovered about this process. He realized the Golden Shadow ritual doesn't just transform the individual person, it activates what Jung called a morphogenetic field of awakening. Each person who genuinely completes the ritual makes it easier for other people to awaken. As if creating a resonance that facilitates similar transformations, Jung theorized there's a specific number of fully integrated people needed to generate an evolutionary tipping point for all of humanity. And in the final manuscripts, he revealed his most daring prediction. When approximately 10,000 people have genuinely completed the process of shadow integration, humanity will undergo an accelerated transformation, a collective elevation of consciousness that will fundamentally change how our species functions. Jung calculated this number was close to being reached in his time and left the manuscripts as a map to accelerate this process. But here's the most disturbing revelation from the manuscripts. Jung discovered there's a force that actively resists this collective awakening, a kind of civilizational shadow feeding off human unconsciousness. He observed that individuals nearing the completion of integration often underwent final attacks from this resistant force, crises of doubt, external sabotage, pressures to abandon the process. Jung called this the final dark night of the soul, the ultimate test before complete freedom. And he devised specific strategies to navigate this phase. When you feel maximum resistance to the process, know that you are close to final liberation. Darkness always intensifies before dawn. That's why he recommended that individuals undergoing deep integration connect with others on the same path, for mutual support during the most challenging moments. Jung wrote, "No one integrates the shadow alone. Individual awakening happens within a network of mutually supportive consciousnesses." And here's the final technique Jung considered essential: the irrevocable commitment to truth. At the beginning of the ritual, you make an internal commitment to never again live comfortable lies, to always choose disturbing truth over soothing illusion. This commitment activates forces that ensure you can no longer retreat to previous unconsciousness, that you will be confronted with constant opportunities to grow, even when you'd rather stagnate. Jung observed that individuals who made this commitment genuinely developed an immunity to self-sabotage, as if the universe conspired to keep them on their evolutionary path. But he also warned, this commitment is irreversible. Once made sincerely, you can no longer choose unconsciousness as an escape. You will be forced to continue growing until you fully realize your potential. That's why he recommended deep reflection before beginning the process, because integrating the shadow is a journey with no return to previous mediocrity. Now, how do you know if you're really ready to make this commitment? Jung created a series of final questions. Are you willing to lose friendships based on false personas? Are you willing to abandon activities that don't nourish your soul? Are you willing to take on greater responsibilities, even when it creates pressure? Are you willing to be misunderstood by people who prefer the previous version of you? Are you willing to lead, even when you'd rather hide? Are you willing to serve human evolution, even when it demands personal sacrifices. If you answered yes to all the questions, Jung would say you possess the necessary psychological structure for complete integration. And here is the final instruction from the manuscripts. Begin immediately. Each day of postponement is one less day to contribute to collective awakening. Humanity needs fully integrated individuals now, not when you feel ready. Jung observed that the feeling of being ready never fully arrives, because integrating the shadow requires courage that transcends logical preparation. You prepare by doing, not by thinking about doing. And in the final manuscripts, Jung left a prediction that sounds prophetic. Between 2020 and 2030, humanity will undergo crises that will force an accelerated awakening. Those who have already integrated their shadow will become beacons of stability amidst the chaos. Those who haven't will be swept away by the turbulence of collective transformation. He predicted that this period would be marked by the collapse of old systems and the emergence of new forms of social organization based on integrated consciousness, and that the people who completed the integration process before this period would become architects of the new civilization. That's why Jung considered it urgent that as many people as possible access this knowledge. But here's the final paradox of the manuscripts. Jung discovered that only people already in the process of awakening can truly understand this information. For others, it sounds like fantasy or delusion. It's what he called the natural filter of consciousness. The information reveals itself only to those ready to use it responsibly. If you've come this far, if these words resonate as profound truth instead of abstract theory, Jung would say you are one of the people called by the evolutionary process. And now you have a choice. You can close this page and return to your known life, continue as you were with the safety of familiar mediocrity, or you can accept the call. Begin the process of integrating your shadow. Become a conscious force of personal and collective transformation. But know that there is no middle ground. Integrating the shadow is a total commitment to your maximum potential. And once begun, there is no turning back. Jung wrote on the last page of the manuscripts, "The future of humanity is in the hands of individuals courageous enough to become fully human. Are you one of them?" And here's the final truth that Jung never published. The manuscripts he kept secret weren't about psychology. They were about conscious evolution, a manual for the next phase of human development. And this manual has reached your hands now because this is the moment when humanity most needs fully integrated individuals. Each person who awakens facilitates the awakening of others. Each integrated shadow illuminates the path for other integrations. Each individual who becomes whole contributes to collective wholeness. Jung knew that one day this knowledge would no longer be secret, that the time would come when human evolution would depend on its dissemination. And that time is now. The burned pages of Jung's manuscript didn't contain just ink. They contained seeds of transformation. And these seeds were planted in your consciousness the moment you began reading these words. Now they are germinating. The only question that remains is, will you allow them to grow completely? Or will you try to control them for fear of what they might become? Jung observed that the final resistance to awakening always comes disguised as prudence. The mind that says maybe later, when I'm more prepared, when circumstances are more favorable. But he also knew that this resistance is the ultimate test. He who waits to be completely ready will never begin. He who begins imperfectly but sincerely will always reach the destination. The manuscript ends with a single phrase in Latin, written in ink that Jung said he prepared with his own tears. Veritas vos liberabit, sed primo vos perturbavit. Truth will set you free, but first it will disturb you. And perhaps this disturbance you feel now, this could be the very sign that your shadow self is ready to emerge from the darkness and become your greatest source of power. The forbidden manuscript is in your hands. The choice rests in your heart. The moment is now.